Good morning. Thank you so much for having me today, Hunter. It's so nice to see you. I'm Liana. I use she, her pronouns, and I'm very honored to be with everyone this morning. A little bit about myself. I have been working now since college for about 10 years or so, a little more. And I have hit a few different industries and a few different roles, a few different jobs, and learned a lot along the way. So want to share those learnings and really kind of have a great conversation today. And like Hunter mentioned, please ask your questions. I'd be more than happy to shed any sort of light on the learnings that I've gathered, but really excited to be here and talk with y'all today.
It's so great to have you. So I'm so glad that we've got to, Liana and we've done a few calls. We kind of did a little kiki on Zoom and said hello. So it's so good to see you. So before we jump into questions, and again, listeners, if you have any questions, drop it in the chat. We would love to hear from you. Is there anything you'd like to share a bit about, like you said, you've been on a bit of a career journey as well. You have experience to share on this. You want to talk about any of those transitions, what that was like, and maybe where you came from, and each time you transitioned a little bit, what was that like?
Sure. I mean, I went to school for political science, thinking I'm going to work in politics and I'm going to go to the Hill and, do all the politic things. And I think that's just been a really like core interest of mine, growing up and in school. But then when I graduated, I was like, I'm not sure if I want to do that. I don't really know what I want to do. And so I put out applications like one does when they just graduate from college everywhere and kind of see who is interested. And I was in DC for a while and then wasn't really having any luck. And there was a lot of like, no, you're too new. No, you don't have the right experience. And so, I mean, one can't stay in DC with no job forever. So I moved back home. And the day after I moved home, someone called. And I was like, oh, I just left. So luckily, Megabus was launching a route from Boston to DC for 50 cents each way. And I was like, well, I can't beat that price. So I went back to DC, I interviewed, I went through all the rounds, and lucky for me, it was my real first breakthrough and my first job in the nonprofit world. And so I had a really great experience working in community development and data grant like information entering and things like very entry level, really great people. And I was like, cool, this is great. I'm getting a lot of experience. And then once I kind of settled in a little bit, I was like, what do I want to do? Like, this is what I'm doing, but like, do I want to continue this in nonprofits and community development and things? So I really tried to look at the things that I loved about what I was doing. I loved working with people. I loved making an impact. But I also love clothes and I love fashion. And like, how can I make something worthy of the two? And so luckily, again, luck, Rent the Runway was opening a store in DC. So I was like, wow, there's going to be a ton of opportunities there. This is one of the most powerful cities in the world. There's going to be a lot of really, powerful women coming through to get clothes, and like I can help them do that. That would be amazing. So I applied there and made this huge shift from nonprofits to retail. And that was a little scary because I really took a leap in going from salary, comfortable, to hourly, which I don't think I've done since I was in high school. And so that was a little scary. It was a huge shift on my lifestyle and everything, but I was really excited. I was really determined to like learn a new business and work my way up and kind of go from there. So from there, eventually over the course of about 5 years, transitioned into the corporate space of Rent the Runway retail, moved to New York City, had the most amazing time in New York. And then like everyone's career story now, the pandemic hits. And retail, among other, businesses that are, very like, retail or hospitality focused, took a hit. And here I was again, like evaluating, what do I want to do? Like, what was great about what I was doing? What should I do next? Should I do another retail thing? And I really took a lot of time, like a lot, like 13 months to figure out, what is it? And what I kind of learned from that was I love thinking about experiences and the human experience, the customer experience, the volunteer experience, the employee experience. How are all those experiences coming together to do whatever a company is trying to do? And that's kind of how I landed at Axios. And so now I am the director of employee experience at Axios, which is a media company. It's my first job in media. It's my first official job in HR. And so there have been just a ton of transitions in my own career, that I'm excited to talk more about.
I love that. Thank you for sharing a bit about your journey. And I'm glad you mentioned your passion for fashion, because I was like, that is a fly jacket, by the way. As soon as you came on the call, I was like, hello, that is awesome. I want one of those.
So fun. I love
Yeah.
a puff sleeve.
I was gonna say the shoulder pads. I love a shoulder pad, a puffy sleeve. I love how it comes back. It's all cyclical. It's fantastic. So it's so interesting to hear, the transitions. There was sometimes it was you felt a calling to change, and then there was other times when the world was changing and you need to make adjustments, right? So now we're in yet another transition. There's an economic transition that's happening right now that's fluctuating. So how for folks that are looking to change, to pivot, to completely change, overhaul their careers, how can folks know when, like how to start, So maybe
Yeah.
some folks are in need of changing, and some folks maybe are maybe a little more comfortable, but they're not really happy. So
Yep.
how do we start?
I think you kind of mentioned it in the question. There's so much fear around it. There's so much fear about getting uncomfortable. I'm always just in my own life been a big believer in, if I'm comfortable, I'm coasting. If I'm uncomfortable, that's probably a good sign. That's probably like means that I'm growing, I'm learning, I'm being challenged. Like that's just the kind of vibe I was going for always. But there's nothing wrong also with being, I think, comfortable. I think it really comes down to, um, you are the CEO of your own life, and you get to decide and evaluate if you're happy. Maybe not happy all day, every day, but at the end of the day, are you happy? And that I think is a really, deep thing to ponder. And there's no right or wrong or estimated amount of time of when you should come up with that. But it's different for everyone. Everyone has different circumstances and needs and everything. So, but I think at the end of the day, once you can get past that element of being afraid or being fearful, uh, so much opens up for you, and everything, there's so many resources nowadays. And I say nowadays, like the first time I was doing this was about 10 years ago. But even from that 10 years ago, just so many more books and podcasts and subject matter experts about transitioning careers. And there are a few along the way that have really resonated with me. And I'm constantly, even though I'm very happy with what I'm doing now, constantly just learning and constantly just like deepening my understanding of like what's out there in terms of like growing in my own career and what I'm doing. And so I think that is like the silver lining, is no matter what the reason is, there's so much out there that is available to you once you've made that decision to take the leap.
Yeah, which is it's a brave act, right? To make that leap. Yeah. And so I'd love to hear about too, maybe some of those resources that you want to share about. And if there's any, so we're talking about, okay, we know that we need to do it. But what do we have to, what's some of the nitty gritty that we have to do? So there's these great resources that can show us some of it, but maybe there's, gaps in our resume, or we want to highlight certain things, if we have an eclectic story like yours, how do you show people that, like, oh, I may have not been in this field yet, but there's a lot that I can bring to the table?
A few things. I mean, first is about getting out there and broadening your network a bit. And you can do that on LinkedIn. I think everyone on the call is doing it right now. I was in this seat going to Power to Fly Diversity Reboots 2 years ago, meeting all these people who are outside the retail sector, outside what I was normally like immersed in. So really just like putting yourself out there in whatever way you feel comfortable, and this is the first step. Everyone on this call is taking the first step, which is exciting. More technically, I started with a master resume, and that was a game changer because I had experience from nonprofits, I had experience from retail, and I was like, how am I going to convince someone not in those industries that my skills are transferable? So my master resume is like 4 or 5 pages long. It has everything that I've done and that I've accomplished. And then I've put categories in the beginning and I color coded them because that's how I stay organized. But so like there would be a category for people management, there'd be a category for business development, category for volunteer and foundation work. Once you have those categories in a resume that's very long, you can then tailor it towards a job you're applying for so that your resume is 1 page, right? I'm not sure if that's still the rule, but 1 to 2 pages, so that it is very focused and it is highlighting the work that the future potential employer finds valuable. I find that very helpful. And then when you're in, so the resume is not to get you the job, it's to get you the interview. Once you get the interview, the other tactic I really like was to do a 3-column approach. So column A is things pulled directly from the job description: entrepreneurial spirit, experience managing a team, like things like that. Column B is what you have experience in, the things that you've done, just like bullet points, very high level. The third column is the storytelling piece, because I think that's a really, really important thing, especially when you're transitioning like a career or an industry. You have to be able to tell a story confidently about how your experiences is going to match the business need that that company has. So the storytelling piece is huge. When I was last searching, like when that 13-month post-pandemic gap, there was a book called Career Stories. I think it's by Carrie Twigg. I have it linked at the end, but that was really, really helpful to help me think about how to talk about the experience I have in the way that was going to make sense to a future employer, a potential employer of an industry I've never been in. So that's where I'd start.
I love that. I love all of that. And I relate with the color coding organizational skills. If you see my calendar, I have probably like 20 different things, like categories, and they're all different color coded things. And for me, I'm a visual person as well. So I can just turn them all off and be like, oh, I don't have enough self-care on my calendar this month, or this is how many meetings I have, or this is how much time I make a calendar just dedicated to job searching, so us can see, and things like Google Calendars or whatever you're using, you can actually go over there and it'll show you how much time you've marked out
Oh,
for
I
each
love
thing.
that.
Yeah. Yeah. So I can be like, oh wow, I've put 3 hours on the books for searching for a job. That's, maybe I need to up that, or maybe it's 20 and I need more self-care, or whatever it is.
You brought up twice two things. I mean, you brought up the same thing twice, self-care. I
Yeah,
think
it's
if
very important
there's,
for me.
yes, I mean, everyone, right? I mean, especially when you're searching for a new role or taking on a challenge, I think sometimes, especially my personality is very type A, very like, go, 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 to stop and pause and take a moment to do something that could be considered like a little win, treating yourself to something like sweet or a nice coffee or something like that, it helps because a lot of times in a process like this, there's a lot more rejection than there is like yeses. And so that I think is really important because we had talked about earlier this one time where maybe like 8 or 9 months into my job search that was about over a year, I was so close to the finish line and I was convinced like this is gonna happen. Like I feel like this is right. I convinced myself. And then I went grocery shopping and I walked into the store. And as I did that, I got the email of like, we're gonna go with somebody else. And it felt like I got hit by a truck. And I walked around the grocery store, didn't get anything, held a basket, and just like a zombie walked through and felt like, oh my God, I have to go. It feels like I have to go back to the start line. Like I have to start all over again. And it was devastating. And what I know now and couldn't really see in the moment was you're never really going back to the start. You're always learning something. You're always, I think that's the smart way to approach it. What did I learn from this experience? What can I do better next time? I really truly believe that like no experience is wasted as long as you're really kind of getting out there.
Yeah, it's so hard to see that, right? I think there's that old phrase, hindsight is 2020, where we can look back and see what we learned. And so you mentioned this devastation in the moment, and you felt like you had to start over. So talk to me about, you said you felt like you got hit by a truck, and there's the feeling of like, oh, we're up against a wall. I just am burnt out from this. How do we stay motivated? If we could give some advice to our past selves or to folks maybe that are listening that are perhaps in between in a tough spot, how to stay motivated, how to stay passionate, how to get over that wall or that hurdle.
There's so many things aside from like cookies and like caramel frappuccinos, which is my preference. Um, I'm really glad you asked that because it's something I learned a few jobs ago that I have not let go of. And for me, it is Brene Brown's The Anatomy of Trust. It is a 20-minute conversation she has, online, and it's in podcast form, but she talks about breaking down having trust with other people, and the spoiler is it starts with trust with yourself. So if you're feeling defeated, if you're feeling the stress, if you're feeling like frustrated, she talks a lot about how do you trust yourself? Like, what is your relationship with yourself right now with trust? Are you respecting your boundaries? Are you being generous to yourself? Are you holding yourself accountable? That conversation really changed my life, I would say. And I bring it now. I talk about it with anyone who will talk about it. We could have a whole conversation just on that. But she in the conversation, she talks about marble jar friends. And those are like friends that you can rely on, lean on, family members, people really that can fill you up and can and help you. And it can be anyone who has a lot of marbles in their jar right now, which is really to say like who has like the energy and the support and the positivity to lift you. Lean on those people. And she talks a lot about too how like giving and offering help is oftentimes a lot easier than asking for help. Which is something I had to learn about too. Like I was like, oh, I don't want to bother them, or they're very busy, or they were like the VP of whatever. But like 9 out of 10 times, people want to help. And so that's what I would say. I was like, look at the people in your life, look at, people in your past career, even strangers. Like someone might know someone in this community in Power to Fly might have a connection. I made so many connections in those networking events that start at the beginning of the diversity reboots. Stay in contact, and if they've reached out or you have a connection for them, like help one another, because I really do believe that energy, that karma comes back.
There's so much great stuff in there. And that's an old, I believe it's the St. Francis prayer. It's better to give than to receive as a piece of that, right? And and it's an act of service, like you said, like it gives us a purpose to help others. And in return, whether that person helps you, it doesn't really, that moment doesn't matter. It's about showing up for someone else. And that uh walking through the world that way, there are other people that walk that way, right? And people do want to help. I also love, I want to highlight, you mentioned here how part of your journey was coming to these diversity reboots. I think that's so wonderful. We talked about this earlier. Just, I love that you are living in action and you are coming to these diversity reboots. You are networking with people. You are going outside of your current
Mm.
community of a network, and you are finding new folks, and that helped you in your transition. So someone asked in the chat on that note, did you take any classes or trainings to transfer to HR? So I know you were networking, you were reaching out, but were there some other things that maybe some in that world that you did?
I'm laughing because throughout my whole interview process here, I was like, they know I've never worked in HR, right? Like, I definitely don't have a single like HR certification. And I reiterated that. And there's so many different pieces of HR is what I learned. It's not just like payroll and like, administrative things and things that you really should have certifications for. Um, the focus that I do is employee experience. So like, how are our employees like absorbing, thriving, doing their very best work here? What kind of environments are we providing? What kind of experiences? I just did a 500-person in-person company retreat in Washington, D.C. That was a phenomenal experience. And if you had asked me just 3 years ago, told me like, oh, today you're looking for a job, but in less than 3 years, you're going to be running this massive event, I would be like, that's not going to happen, but okay. But back to the question, yes. Not HR specific, but I have found I realized early I needed a lot of help in kind of navigating how to get hired again, like in post pandemic. Like, I hadn't really looked for a job since I had graduated college, and I knew a lot had changed. So Bossed Up is a company based out of Colorado that I had known the founder for years when she lived in Washington, D.C. And she and her company have a lot of programs very tailored to different searches. So there's one called Hired that is a job accelerator program that I took and felt was extremely beneficial. I think I learned through Power to Fly about a DEI certification that the University of South Florida did. And then I found a lot of my classmates in Diversity Reboot. And so we were able to connect over that. But things like that, like things like Hired and free online like certificates that could be helpful, they kind of give you that like structural foundation that my creative ideation brain really needed to ground it, because I'm all over the place a lot of times. Like, I have a lot of really great ideas, but a lot of what I've learned over time is discipline and really how to not just have the ideas, but really like take it to the finish line.
Yeah, that is so important. I think we're cut from a similar piece of the cloth where I can thrive within structure, but I don't inherently provide myself with structure. And so when I will find things that do that for me, whether it's a summit, a class, a schedule that is for my, circle back to self-care, like, yoga classes, it's at this time, I have this meditation thing at that time. I need to build that structure so that I can have like a well-rounded day. Otherwise, I can just kind of be aimless in the weeds.
Oh yeah, yeah. Routine for me is very important. My therapist and I talk a lot about it. And having like some sort of like routine, having a timer changed my life. Like, I saw them on Amazon, then I eventually got an Apple Watch, but a timer to like, I had no idea how long I was spending on things. It really helped provide structure.
Oh, wow. That is really interesting. I haven't tried that one yet. So you set
Oh,
a
there's like,
timer for each task or something, or what do you do?
well, yeah, like when I was looking for a job, I'd be on job boards for hours and I'd be like just
Oh.
aimlessly like looking and I'd be like, oh wow, it's 3 o'clock. Like so there's a timer in a browser, it's like egg timer or something,
Oh yeah.
which I started with. Then I actually got a timer on Amazon and then I got a watch which has the timer. So I'll set like 60 minutes, an hour and a half, 2 hours, and like know, like start my day and be like, okay, this is what my day is gonna look like roughly. And then I'm gonna live
Mm.
by the timer because otherwise, next thing you know, like you have to make dinner, the dog has to go out, like I lose track of time.
Absolutely, absolutely. Yeah, and I know there's other apps too for tracking on your, oh, I'm spending this much time in this app doing that, and that can help folks organize their days, especially as if we're lucky enough for our days to fill up, right?
Mhm.
So we just have 2 minutes left, which breaks my heart, Liana, but I'm so glad that we've got to chat today. Is there anything that you would like for folks that are listening, just a major takeaway or lesson from your career that you would like to share with our listeners here, or any takeaways that from this talk that you would offer up to folks that are making the jump or ready to?
Yeah, I think two things come to mind. One I kind of already mentioned, but genuinely, generally, people want to help you. And there's no harm in asking, like asking for a 10, 15, 20 minute just touch base, a call. Hey, I saw this person is in your LinkedIn network. Is this a close connection? Would you be open to connecting us? Very short and sweet, like people want to help most of the time. And if they don't, a lot of people be like, I really can't right now. It's just not a good time. And that's okay. Uh, the other thing I learned too from a leader in my career, I've been so lucky to have a lot of really strong leaders wherever I've been, is she said one day, like, good work is always going to follow you and shine through. And if there's things going on that you're like frustrated by, you need to keep your head down and continue to do good work. Just do good work.
Well, Liana Steir, thank you so much for making the time today. And how can folks stay connected with you?
LinkedIn, LinkedIn.
It works. It's as simple as that, friends. So find Liana Steir on LinkedIn, keep doing good work, and keep showing up. And thank you, Liana, so much for making the time. I hope we get to do this again.
Me too. Thanks, Hunter. And thank you, everyone.
Have a great rest of your day.
You too.